On this video, I am going to continue what I have been doing about Christ in the book of Matthew. We have seen the visit of the Magi, the visit to Christ by the Magi. Now we're going to see how Joseph takes Jesus and goes to Egypt and then back to the promised land or back to Canaan. It reads, and I'm picking up at verse 13. And when they departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph, saying, that's when the Magi departed, arise and take the child and his mother and flee unto Egypt, and be there until I tell you, for Herod is about to seek the child to kill it. So the angel again appears and is encouraging Joseph to go to Egypt and not to go back to Galilee or Israel at this point. So in verse 14 it reads, and he arising took the child and his mother by night and departed unto Egypt, and he was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I have called my son. Here we have a quote from Hosea 11:1. And Matthew's quoting of the Hebrew Bible is very, very interesting. He is quoting to show here how Christ is fulfilling these texts. When we look at Hosea 11:1, it is a text that deals with Israel being called out of Egypt. And now it's applied to Christ. And Matthew writes that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. I think Matthew is clearly presenting Jesus as the final Israel. As Israel was called out of Egypt, so Jesus is called out of Egypt. He is the representation, I believe, of ideal Israel in his own person. And I think Matthew is driving that point home. So what we see in Hosea 11:1 by Matthew's use is what we might call a sod, a deeper or mystical interpretation, or a remez, a hint. And clearly in the Jewish hermeneutical system, you had remez, hint, and you had sod, the mystical. And we often speak of it as a typological interpretation. This text becomes a type of Christ, who is the final Israel being called out of Egypt. So then we read on. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked by the Magi, was exceedingly angry. And when he sent, he killed all the children which were in Bethlehem and in those regions, in its regions, from 2 years of age and down, according to the time which he inquired from the Magi. In other words, he had inquired from the Magi when the star appeared. And so he's calculating about 2 years to make sure Herod doesn't want any competition from anyone threatening his autocracy and his rule. So we're told then, as a result of Herod's cruel violence, that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping, and Mitch crying or weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, and she was not willing to be comforted because they are not. This is a quote from Jeremiah 31, again, verse 15, looking at what I believe to be a typical application. In its primary context, Rachel is weeping because of the Babylonian exile and what was happening to Israel and to her children. Now, Rachel is weeping again, and it's the weeping concerning Jesus, and not only concerning Jesus, but what is happening with all the children that were being attacked by Herod. And so I believe we see again a typical or a typological use of Jeremiah 31, verse 15 here. But then we continued. Now, when Herod died, behold, the angel of the Lord appears in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise and take the child and his mother and go into the land of Israel. For the ones who are seeking the life of the child have died. So notice how the angel keeps appearing, continues to appear to Joseph and to Mary and instructing them what to do. So we're told, and he Joseph arising, took the child, that is Jesus, and his mother, and entered into the land of Israel. And when he heard that Archelaus is ruling, or was ruling Judah, instead of his father Herod, he was troubled. And he didn't want to go there because he was troubled to enter there. But being warned in a dream, he departed unto the regions of Galilee. So this is how Jesus goes to Galilee. And we're told, and when he came, he sojourned in the city that is being spoken of as Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken through the prophets, that he shall be called a Nazarias. It's interesting. There's a play on the Hebrew word netzer in Isaiah 11:1. A netzer, meaning branch, would come forth from the root of Jesse and from David. And that netzer branch is a passage dealing with the Messiah. And I believe that what Matthew is doing is taking the sound netzer and applying it to Nazareth. So what we see here, it would be almost like making the statement, isn't it interesting that the branch came from Branchtown? So that the netzer, the branch, the Messiah, which is Jesus, he's clearly applying this to Jesus, who is the branch, who is the Messiah. Isn't it interesting that he came from Nazarias, from Nazareth? So the netzer came from Nazareth. And again, like I said, the branch came from Branchtown. So this is a very interesting use of the Hebrew Bible in terms of hermeneutics or interpretation. And it's based really upon the sound of Nazareth with Netzer, or we could translate it the branch with Branchtown, at least giving an illustration of what I think Matthew is doing. So looking at these texts, we see Matthew's use of the Hebrew scriptures and its ultimate application of Jesus as basically the final Israel who is called out of Egypt. And we also see him as the branch that was prophesied to come in light of Isaiah chapter 11. Again, Notice the emphasis upon Christ fulfilling these Old Testament texts, and also Matthew's use of them and applying them to our Lord.